Welcome to Deep Speak, where we ask the questions to the answers of the universe. Follow our crazy trains of thought as we start on one topic and end up
in a whole other dimension.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ready to start out with a little game?
Sure.
Okay, so I say a word, you say a word. We have to say 10 words and make a full sentence.
Okay.
All right, want me to start?
Sure.
Tomatoes.
Are.
Really?
Good.
Sometimes.
In.
A.
Summer.
Potato.
Summer. Famine.
A summer potato famine.
That's when you eat tomatoes.
When you have a summer
When you have
tomato
no potatoes, you eat tomatoes.
That's the best alternative to a potato.
That's just what you have to do.
Is a tomato. Today's discussion, we're talking about, well, we're starting out, we go off on rampages all the time, but we're talking about
psychological and chemical addictions and repetitive patterns.
Yeah, one of my, I think, most fascinating things is drug addiction, because I don't understand. I think it's most fascinating because it's the thing that I have the least amount of information on. So who best to talk about it? I don't know. It's from like a clear mind, a clear perspective, I have information from what I've seen clients say or what I've seen people who have known go through, but me, myself, I don't understand the allure of drugs and even alcohol,
And that's pretty fascinating because I feel like the general populace does engage in those things.
Yeah.
So I think it's really admirable, but it's really interesting to look at the fact that the general populace does those things on varying levels.
Yeah. So you were talking.
Consistently.
You were saying you had some ideas about the numbingness of what it
Oh,
does?
yeah. So the question before we were recording was, why would people want to, escape, maybe not escape reality, you worded it differently, I don't remember what it was, but
I think I said numb.
Numb your thoughts or be out of control of your own thoughts.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand, because I don't like the feeling of just being out of control. Like your brain starts to do its own thing. You're not you. You're not making decisions to behave or act or say things. They just kind of like do themselves.
Yeah, and I guess it's sort of tricky because everyone is coming from maybe a little bit of a different place, so it's hard to generalize, and it's also depending on what the chemical is that they're interacting with. Like obviously alcohol will get people drunk, and that can cause a different behavior than doing cocaine or something, Like you have a different level of losing control of things. Like, if you get really, really drunk, you'll probably lose control of your bodily functions and your decision-making skills, right? Usually that's what happens
Bodily
when you get
functions?
drunk. Well, yeah, you stumble.
You get dizzy. I thought you meant like you just start peeing everywhere.
Well, some people do that, but
That's true.
You lose control of, your balance and
Yeah.
and
You can't walk, you can't talk, you
slur
can't
your
think,
words,
you can't.
right?
I don't understand why you would want to turn yourself into a...
Right, and that is interesting. That's an interesting question because is that what the person is trying to achieve? Because they know rationally that if they get drunk, that's going to happen more than likely, right? The average person behaves like that.
Yeah.
Not everyone. Like I don't generally get like that, but if I drank enough, I can get like that too.
Right.
But it's kind of I don't know if taboo is the right word, but sort of a joke like, oh man, I drank too much last night. I was an idiot, to laugh at yourself. Like everyone knows that you can wake up with a major hangover and then laugh at the stupid things you did or said the night before. Why is that funny? And why is that a thing to be like, oh, I was just drunk, kind of thing.
Yeah. Is it a way for them to just be more of their authentic self and then not care about how they are as an authentic being?
I think that might be part of it.
I mean, specifically, we're talking about alcohol right now.
Right
because,
now. That's why I said they're all different, where you have to narrow it down to different chemicals.
Where you have, alcohol, you have weed, and you have, or cannabis. Like meth and heroin is a different category. And then you have like ecstasy right? I'm so bad. I don't even know drugs.
I mean, there's stimulants, there's depressants, which alcohol falls under a depressant. And then there's hallucinogens like mushroom, LSD. And opioids are heroin. I don't know what meth is a stimulant, I think. Meth can literally be made out of stuff under the kitchen sink, like Breaking Bad. And I don't know what goes into it or anything like that, but I mean, it's basically a bunch of chemicals.
Oh, that's so weird.
Right. But
I don't get it. I'm not one to shame people who are addicted. I'm not. I just literally don't understand it. I want to, without falling into an addiction, understand it.
I always whenever we talk about this, I always try to get into like my teenage state of mind, because that was when I experimented more, not with meth or anything like that, but I eventually got to a place like, around 18, where that's where I was like trying mushrooms and LSD and whatever. And I just, I was more open to things, and it was like, well, why was I open to that? And I feel like that's where a lot of it starts for people, is teenage years. And it's probably because you're exploring and you don't really know a lot yet.
Exploring about life and about who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel detached enough. Obviously, I chose a different path in life to not do any of those things, but it's not far away so much where I can't remember why I did it anymore. Because I pretty much know why I did it. It was just sort of a experimentation. I've always been fascinated, what is consciousness? So, and then of course there's other, I wouldn't say self-esteem issues, because you don't really know what self-esteem, if you don't try something, you don't know exactly where the line is that you cross. That's what I always thought people didn't get.
What?
I always felt like people didn't get that, because in Dare and like people that tell you like drugs are bad, like they usually are people that have no experience with them, and usually, not always. And then it just seems like a shallow talking point. Like they say, well, don't do them. Well, why? Like, what does it do exactly?
That's why I want to understand it.
Right. And they can't really tell you. And then they tell you things like, well, you're probably just doing drugs because you have a self-esteem issue. So you're trying to make yourself feel better. Yeah, you hear those kind of things. Peer
pressure?
Yeah, or peer pressure is common.
Yeah.
Nobody ever pressured me to do mushrooms or LSD.
No.
If anything, like I got maybe pressure to smoke weed through the years, which made no sense to me. I don't understand why, out of all things, like no one ever pressured me to do like bigger things. It was always like, oh man, come on, just smoke with us. Just smoke with us. No, I'm trying. I don't want to do it anymore, and I don't like the way I feel. Well, come on, man, just take one hit.
So that
that's literally happened to me, and it's hilarious.
Like a total commercial,
right? And I know it sounds fake, but I've literally had people do that, and sometimes they don't know they're doing it, but sometimes they do, and then they start laughing, like, "Oh, I sound like one of them guys," But never had anyone.
That's a whole different topic, it's an offshoot, because peer pressure is like. You don't want to feel like you're the only one getting high.
Right.
Or the only one in the room, because then you're going to feel like people are judging you.
Yeah.
Doing it.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
It's the sober guy in the room kind of mentality.
Yeah.
I have been around a lot of people.
Almost always.
Right. Like we just want you to get high with us because like it's
Oh
going to
no,
be
thank
weird
you.
if you're
I'm
sitting
always like, oh
there.
no, thank you.
Right.
I was always, I'm the DD. I'm the driver.
Yeah.
And then they leave me alone.
Yeah. I was always honest though. It was like, I just don't like the way it makes me feel. And like a lot of people, some people were assholes and they were like, oh, that's fucking stupid. You know, like, oh, well, now I definitely don't want to smoke with you because you're a prick, you know?
Right.
Most people were like, huh, that's interesting. I don't feel that way. Well, good for you, but I do. And I'd
Yeah.
rather drink alcohol, you know? Chemically works
Yeah.
for me. I
And
don't.
it's funny because even within the alcohol range, there different alcohols make you feel differently,
Oh, yeah, totally.
which is crazy. But
So
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just
Go
wanted
back.
to stay on track with like, those are generic answers that you're given. You know, like, oh, there
A
must be a
why? A
deep root
why?
of why you try or experiment or just do things in general. Like, well, you have a self-esteem issue or you're making up for something or blah, blah, blah. Those are generic answers because none of those
Mm.
apply to any experimentation that I've ever done. I don't believe.
Well, I think when my kids were younger, I always because I didn't do drugs, so I didn't even know what to expect about how to tell your kids not to do it, except just don't do it. And then I was really religious at the time when Sabrina was just starting to come into her teenage years. Right before that, we were religious for years and going to church all the time. And so it was just kind of like, that's just not what you do. Just like you don't use God's name in vain and you don't do drugs. You know what I mean? And that did not help because she did more drugs than I ever could have imagined a person even trying. I think there's a religious aspect too that people would try to detour other people from. But then again, it's just like, well, because God doesn't want you to. It doesn't help. Like, I
Another
just don't think
non-answer.
it's like, okay, well, like, God doesn't want me to eat chocolate either. Like, well, can you give me the reason? Like, God usually has a reason for the things that he doesn't want you to do. Old Testament, don't eat pig. Why? Well, because it makes sense. It was unclean. You couldn't cook it enough or something. I don't know.
Back then, right?
Yeah, back at that point. And then New Testament was more of, yeah, no, you got good cooking ways. Go ahead, eat pig.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I just feel like one of the things that my mom did well, and I do think my mom did a lot of things well, but just well for me specifically, because every kid is different. But she said to me, since I was very little, don't ever try drugs because your dad was addicted to drugs, and so it's in your blood to get addicted. I don't know if
Yeah,
that
I
was
always heard
bad
that.
or if that was good. It obviously it didn't work for my sister. It didn't work for my brother. They both smoked cigarettes from the beginning, like from, they were very young when they started, like 10, 11, 12, right away. I just never, ever had a craving to smoke a cigarette. I never had a craving to try to breathe in something that wasn't fresh air. I love fresh air way too much. It just wasn't appealing to me. I never understood why did you take your first drag of cigarette? Do you remember how old you were?
Yeah, I was 15. And it's weird because like up till then I had no interest either. Not just Nana would always warn me, like, don't
Oh,
smoke.
because
I
Nana
smoked for
smoked.
years and she had emphysema in
Oh.
the end, but just she would breathe so heavy going up and down the stairs in the basement, and she would always say like I smoked up, I quit, and she didn't quit until her mid 60s, I think.
Oh.
And so, the way people smoked in the 30s, 40s, 50s, was like,
Yeah, and they had no clue it was going to be bad for you.
right. It was a status symbol,
Yeah.
like, anyway, people just did it.
Yeah.
And she was just like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And so, yeah, I remember like my friend like smoking when we were like 12 or something. And I was like, ugh, I had no interest in it. He didn't pressure me.
Was your friend 12?
Yeah.
God, that's so young. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
But
middle
then,
school.
yeah, right. I had no interest then, but then what shifted when I was 15? Well, I was a little older. I was a teenager, and that's when you start getting into those type of
There's a
things.
big difference between a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I just remember 1996, it was like going to the gas station, like, oh, I can get cigarettes because I know the gas station attendant, one of my friends,
Oh,
you know,
really?
and so it was like one of those like, ooh, we shouldn't do this things.
It was the allure of the
Yeah.
taboo-ness of
And
it.
for me, and I really didn't even really want
It
to
was
do it.
it was your rebelliousness.
Right. And so I smoked and drank like a wine cooler that night. And
Is that the first time you drank alcohol?
yeah.
So you had
Well,
alcohol and a cigarette at the same
no,
time.
it defines, it's hard to say what you define as drinking alcohol because the year before, I think I drank like a Miller Lite or something that we stole from Emery's parents
Was
or
it good
something.
when you first drank it?
No, it was like, I felt like a badass. I was like, I'm drinking a beer. Me and him both were like drinking a beer, you know,
Yeah.
but it tasted like shit to me, you know.
I wonder if there is that rebellious nature
Oh yeah.
that teenagers need to like pull away from their
Mm-hmm.
from their parents, from being a kid,
From being a kid.
and
Yep.
they think that what the adults do, you know, sex,
Yep.
drugs, alcohol, like then it makes them feel like, oh, I get a taste of what being an adult
Oh
is.
yeah, it definitely
I
felt
wish we
that way
could
for me.
have callers on,
Right.
because I'd love to hear people's experiences
Yeah.
of their first time and what they
Right.
did. So, yeah.
But anyway, so that night that I smoked and drank at the same time, I got sick.
Did you really?
Sick. I threw
Like
up
you
in the
threw
backyard.
Seriously?
Yeah.
How many
and
cigarettes do you think you had?
well, I smoked way too many,
Oh,
like
that's
two,
why. Because it
and
wasn't the wine cooler then.
well, that tasted like crap too. Yeah, so it just made my stomach turn, and they were Marb
Oh.
Lights, I remember, and that taste like just wouldn't go away. And
Oh.
I didn't smoke for 2 more years or a year at least.
Seriously?
Yeah. It left literally such a bad taste in my mouth that
Yeah.
it just was
The
like,
thought of
why
it
did
was
I do
gross.
that? But then again, a year later,
Did
I
you
was
have any
like,
cravings for it though? Even though
no,
like your body didn't get addicted to
no,
nicotine right away,
no.
right? Okay.
Mm-mm.
I wonder how long it takes.
I don't know, but like I said, it wasn't until a year later where, like my friend that had his license, I didn't just yet, you know, he was a crazy smoker, you know, and so like it was, he would hand them to you, and then it was like, oh sure, you know, and then it was just fun, you know, and then I smoked. That's when I started smoking
Oh,
more
wow.
regularly.
And that was your gateway drug into trying other drugs?
No, I don't believe in gateway drugs because I didn't do
Oh.
anything. I didn't do it. I just smoked
Keep
in
coughing.
97. You know, I just smoked. And then, well, but there were, see, there, you know, you can't
Did
get
you
them.
feel cool then too?
I did.
Did you? Yeah, you felt like when you were holding your cigarette and smoking, you're like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, it felt a little
It's
bit
funny
like
how
that.
psychologically that got into our
Right.
brains,
Yeah.
that is a cool thing.
Yeah.
Where did that come from and how did it get into our brains? I mean, by those years, we knew that smoking was not good for you.
Yeah.
We didn't have commercials still, did we? Of people and TV shows of people smoking
Yeah, there were
on it?
commercials.
In the 80s?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. When did they outlaw that? When did they ban TV commercials from showing cigarettes and people smoking cigarettes?
I'm trying to think.
Because I know it was still, in the 70s, it was still acceptable to smoke
Yeah,
in your hospital.
I do remember cigarette commercials in the early 90s, like Newport was, or I'm trying to think what their tagline was, like Newport Cool or something like that.
It's funny how you equated smoking with being a cool thing.
Yeah.
I just don't know the psychological link to that.
Yeah.
Is it like, I really wish I could get into the
Well,
mind
I'm
of that.
wondering if it's partially marketing too, because
With Bernays?
right, I think it is that because obviously we've been smoking tobacco for hundreds, if not thousands of years, you know. So oh yeah, like Native people
Well, I know
around the world, like,
but around the world, I know
dried
here.
tobacco and smoked it, you know. It was just a different ritual, you know.
Wait a minute. Did people before we came over?
Yes, Native Americans, some tribes.
Before we came over, did we smoke as white Europeans?
I don't know, honestly, but I do know.
Now I want to know that.
I do know Native tribes definitely smoked.
Right. So then, when we came over, did they get us addicted
No, I don't think so.
tobacco.
I honestly don't really know about
It's
the
the Native
rituals.
Americans'
Right,
fault.
it's their fault.
I'm just.
Anyway, like, I don't really know about that, but it's been in human culture and history for a long time.
Yeah, that would be
But
really
it
interesting
didn't
to look
really
up.
become a commercialized thing until the Industrial Revolution.
Well, we heard about Bernays doing those marketing focus groups
Yeah.
about in the show The Century of Self. They do
Yeah.
talk about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that show, how he wanted to appeal to the female smokers more.
Yeah.
Wasn't it something about trying to make it more
It was
like
a representation of a penis or an extension of ego.
of a female? Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
feminism.
Yep.
Yes. So it was like, look, I'm strong and manly. Anything a man can do, I can do better.
Yep.
I could bring home the bacon. I
Yep.
could fry it up in a pan, and I'll never ever
That's
let
so
you forget that
fascinating.
you're a man. And that was that same time frame in
Right.
the 80s and 90s that strong female power.
Well,
I mean, it came out in World War II. Obviously,
yeah, it goes
too,
way
but-
beyond that.
So, anyways, so that's really fascinating. But then you've quit, and then you started, and then you've not smoked for
Me?
3 years
No,
now.
it's been
December of 18.
3 years.
Yeah.
And the previous gap was what? I quit in 2002, and then I went all the way through 2008. I started smoking again, so that was 6 years there.
You had a 6-year gap of not smoking. I don't understand that. How do you all of a sudden just be like, yeah, now I want to, like, I don't get like how your body is off of it, and then you're like, I just want it in my body again.
No, it wasn't like that. It was like that rebelliousness again.
Oh, was it?
It was like it kind of carried over into an adult form where what I was going through at the time of my early life crisis, the breakup and not really knowing what I was doing in life, not liking where I was living, not liking all of this and that, and like, oh God, I'm going to be 30, in a few years kind of thing. And so when I was going through all that, I just remember literally like other people that I started hanging around were smoking. I'm like, yeah, it was sort of like I was like retracing my steps to where I felt like I left off, sort of. And then it was sort of like, yeah, fuck you. I don't care. And I'm just going to smoke. It was
a way of reclaiming like your life?
Sort of, yeah. It was associated with like it sounds really stupid looking back at it and putting it in words, but it sort of was like a reclamation of independence. And so it is interesting that psychologically there is still some link between doing these things and independence or sense of self.
That's interesting.
Because it lasted that. It's not like it just went away like, oh, all of a sudden now I'm me and I'm smoking. It was like all through those years, it was a sense of self. Like, this is what I do. Like, part of my ritual, part of my persona. Yeah. Like I write and then I go out for a cigarette, kind of thing. And that's the kind of guy I am, like a smoker and a writer, I don't know.
Drink
it just
my wine.
It's like intertwined.
Smoke a cigarette and then write another chapter.
That's what I did.
That was your thing. But you didn't like in your mind, you weren't like, oh, I'm going to be this person.
No, I didn't think about it.
You just developed out of something. I mean, it could have been a collection of people that you've seen throughout the years that emulated this kind of persona that you wanted. And then you collectively put together this kind of character that you decided to become.
Yeah.
Which we all are.
Yeah.
We all are a collection of all of our experiences and the way we talk, the way we walk, the way we move, the decisions we make. We're all heavily influenced by nature and our experiences throughout life. Like, we never even know like who we are attracted to can be a result of, like someone who babysat us when we were
Right.
4 months old. You never even know.
Oh yeah, if
Like,
you want to get Freudian, I hate the whole what is it? There's a term for it. Where they say you're attracted to your parent.
oh,
What is that?
is there a term for that?
Yes.
I don't know.
I can't think of what it is right now,
But it is interesting.
I mean,
That's a
but the
whole
weird
different
thing
topic.
is, and not to get off topic, but yeah, I've seen, when I learned about that, I saw that behavior in other people, but it wasn't always. So it's not like a repetitive thing like, yes, this is what all men and women do. You don't. Actually, I found that a lot of people almost
Sorry.
rebel against that. And that's what I think, not to get off track again, but I think that's another form of consciousness hierarchy, is when you can override nature decisions, because I remember trying to get to the root of that. I asked my mom, like, what did you like about dad? Because he, do you feel like he was like had traits of Grandpa Ray or,
I don't see that at all.
no, I don't eat it. And she was like, no, he was so
The
different. He
opposite
was the
of Grandpa-
opposite of how he was.
Oh.
And I just liked him anyway, So it wasn't like
That's
she liked him
so-
because he was
yeah.
different than our grandpa. It's just that she liked him and he just happened to be very different.
I mean, don't we do that in all things in our life, though, too? Like, sometimes you're like, I became this because my mom was also this. But then
Yeah.
other times you're like, I became this because my mom was the opposite of this. Like, you
Right.
you want to be exact opposite of what your parent was. And it depends on what your perception is. If
Yeah.
you loved something about your parent, then maybe you wanted more of that. If you hated it, then you want the opposite of it, and those decisions are made that way. Then sometimes you hate it, but you hate it so much you don't realize that you're actually attracting it in, and then you live in this cognitive dissonance for your whole life, which is really sad, where you keep attracting in the bad qualities of your parent.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. There's so many pieces to that. That's really fun too. We should have a whole nother discussion about that, because I have so many examples of it. And even you, there's pieces of you that remind me of my father. You're creative. Like, my dad is very, like, musical, creative in that way. And that's part of what I was attracted to you. Even though I didn't have my dad in my life for most of my life, those were pieces of you that I really liked too. But if you had the negative qualities that my dad has, oh God, no. But that's because I'm conscious enough and aware enough to be like, and love myself enough, which is also another aspect of it, that I know that what would be good for me and what wouldn't be good for me.
It's hard to say, like, if it comes from, like, where it comes from, like nature or lack of nurture or nurture.
Because there's pieces of me that remind you of your mom too.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is, like, sometimes, right, exactly. Like, and it doesn't mean that I'm consciously like, this reminds me of my mom. Like,
but
that's
there's pieces
gross,
of me that's
know?
opposite of your mom too, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, it almost doesn't even, it cancels itself out, I feel like, because it doesn't even matter who your frame of reference is. Like, you might just like an artistic person, whether or not your dad was or not.
That's true.
You
There could be something to that.
And I just like how I perceive as a stronger woman, that has nothing to do with my mom.
It could just also be the fact that, you grow up in a certain environment or around certain personalities or around certain vibration of somebody or of several people, and that just feels more comfortable to you.
Right.
And so then you just feel more at ease with people who are like that.
There's
Not
a lot
that there's actual anything to do with sexual. I don't think it's a sexual thing.
Well,
at
that
all.
was Freudian. That everything with him was perverted.
Freud was messed up.
Right.
I can't even believe that he's like such a foundation of our
Right.
psychological industry.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Including his nephew.
Exceptionally.
Exceptionally.
His nephew was a
psychopath.
Borderline tyrant.
Right.
Anyways, let's go back to
So how do
drugs.
we fix the economy?
Just these chimpanzees
Running around.
hurling on this tiny rock in space, man. So how do we fix the economy? Oh, Brent Pella plug. He's so awesome. Okay, so I really still want to hear what you have to say about your thoughts about numbing yourself. So we originally started with talking about, I think my question that I asked was, why do people who get into like heroin and meth, they want to not be part of this earth almost. It seems like they want to not really be here. They want to numb themselves from this life. They don't really want to be conscious here. Why don't they just kill themselves? And I'm not saying that as a suggestion. I'm saying that as a sense of curiosity. Like, why would they be in the space between where I'm not really living in the world, but I am, and they hate being here?
I think, I don't know.
Do they hate being here?
From my perspective, which I can't speak for everyone, of course, but I feel like it's just a matter of time before they're not here. I feel like it's sort of they're just here and they don't care anymore. And my perspective, having nothing to do with that drug in particular, but just from being in places where I've been extremely depressed and borderline suicidal, like it was too extreme. Like, I personally knew that I didn't want to not continue my life, but that the pain and the perceived suffering was so great that you feel stuck here, and it feels like hell. It feels like a punishment. So the only way to continue on is like escapism. Like, I've been there before, sadly. And so
But
I don't
is
know
there
if
a
it's
hope that it's going to get better and that's why you're not ending yourself?
I don't know. It might be like a very fine line of hope, maybe, but I don't think you're not sitting there thinking like, I'm just going to give it another day. I don't think it's something in your mind. It might just be like, I'm just going to continue and see what happens kind of thing, maybe.
My heart aches for people. Like, it makes me cry thinking about somebody hating their life and hurting so badly that they want to numb themselves every day from it. Like, that's just so sad to me. I don't know, like I said, like, I'm outside of that world looking into it, and it breaks my heart, and I don't know how we can fix it because it's such a problem. I mean, so many people have died from opiate addictions, just, more than freaking, virus in the last couple years. Like, suicides are up, drug addiction's up, domestic violence is up. Like, there's so many things that happen from this with the lockdowns and the fear that just kind of like blanketed our earth. It wasn't even just one area, it was the entire earth, and it just took people to their darkest places, and that's just so sad to me. And how do you get out of that? I don't think shaming, I don't think screaming, like you said, like, just don't do it. I guess obviously it's not that easy. If it was that easy, then people would just stop. I hate that when people say that about even food addiction. Well, just stop eating. Why don't you stop eating that much? Like, all the stuff that we saw this week with Crowder and Tim Cast and who else was there? Elijah and them.
Yeah.
Well,
I did this. Like,
they just like, I just stopped eating as much. Like,
right.
Do you understand that that's not how that works with overeating? Like, it's so psychological. And then the whole wiping my tear away. And then the whole idea that, like, there's a whole nother story with the whole fat shaming thing where everybody's like, okay, don't fat shame. I agree with that. And then you have the opposite side where people are saying, well, yes, we should shame them into eating healthier. Yeah, because that works.
Yeah, that works.
Like, let me just shame you into stopping your addiction. That's not how that works, people. Stop. Like, you have to have a balance, though. You don't have to be like, I want to be 300 pounds and not be able to move. Not saying that everybody 300 pounds can move, but I'm just saying you can't, like, have a desire and a goal to be that much. But you also cannot... People eat because they feel bad. So why would you think that making them feel bad is going to make them not eat? It's so stupid.
That's
and it's definitely not a long-term solution. That's why diets don't work.
Right.
Because people are like, oh, I hate my body. I hate my life. I hate the way I feel. I hate that I can't stop eating and that I love chocolate cake. And then because of that, what's the one thing that brings them so much, that makes them feel good, that gives them this the dopamine release?
Food.
Food.
Yeah.
So that they feel like shit, and then they eat because
It's
they
a
feel like
cycle.
shit, and that's where binging and all of these actual, like, it just makes me so mad. And to not see that it is something that people will look at somebody who's anorexic and they'd be like, oh my God, that's so sad. But then they look at somebody who's overweight, like morbidly obese, right? Not just stupid BMI calculation, because that's fucked up and doesn't work at all. But they look at them and they just think, oh, that's a horrible person who just doesn't have self-control. I'm like, just literally the same thing. Like, come on now. That's not fair.
Right.
And they just shame them. And I think that's what our world is trying to do. We're trying to rebalance that, where like skinny models aren't necessarily the best thing, but you don't shame skinny models either. How about let's just not shame anybody, and we help people and just keep putting the vibration out there of like, I want people to be healthy. That's what I always tell my girls. Just as long as it's healthy, just make sure that you're balancing health, that you're not sacrificing your health for a certain look. And in vice versa, like either eating too much or eating too little or whatever. Like, just make sure that you're listening to your body and that you're loving yourself, because love is the only thing that's going to help. And that's what I feel like with addictions too, like of any kind. Like, I feel like there's a hole that somebody is trying to fill. Right? And sometimes they fill it with God and religion, and they get really into that, and that helps them, right? And then sometimes they fill it with, what other things do people fill it with? Like exercise? I don't know. I feel like addictions are a hole in your soul, in your vibrational body, and that's they try to fill it with certain things. And I feel like such a big piece of it is filling it with self-love, maybe. And I don't mean egotistical kind of love, but I mean acceptance of yourself, loving yourself, knowing that you're not perfect.
Yeah, that sort of goes back to that self-esteem thing where
I know, but you were just shaming me,
right,
or shaming people for saying just it's your self-esteem.
Yeah, but
issue.
I mean, obviously you're giving a more in-depth explanation of that instead of dismissing it with slapping a self-esteem label on it. But I do think the deeper down thing that we're not mentioning, aside from any hole in the soul or self-esteem, is the lack of understanding of why you're here to begin with. I feel like that hole isn't just a self-esteem or self-love problem, which it is, but I also think that a lot of people feel lost and they don't know why they're here, and they forget to even ask the question.
Oh.
Because when you're a kid, you have that, most kids still have that innate question asking, why am I here?
The sense of wonder.
What are people? Right. What is this? What is the world?
Sky blue? Yeah.
And then you get indoctrinated and you get programmed into society, and you never really fit in. A lot of people, even if they pretend very, very well, they feel like they don't fit in. They don't know why they're here.
They feel like imposters.
Yeah, and they don't. And so that continues to develop through adulthood. And then through adulthood, you drag along these addictions, like you're talking about, in various forms. They can be more healthy addictions that are socially acceptable, like over exercising, because that's an addiction too. Which is also
an addiction, absolutely.
Right.
Gotta get buff.
But
26.2.
All of these, no matter what it is, are all addictions to fulfill something. And I think it's not just a self-love thing. It's a forgotten question where they're no longer wondering why they're here to begin with. And maybe they do still ask that question, but they haven't figured it out. And I don't think you really have to figure it out. You just have to.
I don't think we ever really know.
I don't think we ever really know, but I think you have to keep asking the question, because that orientates you with how you live your life. If you think you're just here to...
Is that the right question? Why am I here?
Well, I don't know.
Or is it like, I don't ever know why I'm here, but what can I do while I am? Like, how can I make the most of this life?
How can I make the most of it is a good question. And I feel like when you lose track of that, then you're just in some kind of self-preservation mode,
Yeah.
and you're just mindlessly filling your time and your routine with
Drones.
drone like behavior, and you're
So
not
many of
absorbing
the world is.
everything you could be, or
Right.
making, I hate saying
Yeah.
making the world a better place, because that's a very generic overused term now, but
How have you earned your place in the world
because
today?
that's also an addiction. I feel like that's
Yes,
also a
I
superiority
agree.
complex
It
of some
is.
kind.
It
Like, I
is.
am here to save. Why aren't you saving the world? Well, nothing needs saving, and nothing can be
That's great
saved.
wokeness right there.
Right, exactly.
With
And
the
but
bleeding
that's why
heart liberals.
that's why that's so appealing, is because
Yeah.
it's another addiction.
Because it makes them feel like, oh, I
Worth,
have value
value.
now. Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that you're in value. I have that book called Intrinsically Good. And that was the first time I was presented with or heard the idea of like that we are good just intrinsically from birth. That we're given this. You don't have to earn your place in the world. That you just get to be here. And I think that that's like such a good way to think about it, is that you're here regardless of why. I ask that question to all my clients. Why do you think you're here on Earth? And there are some people who are just very like, I have no idea. And they feel very upset about not knowing why. And then there's other people, the people who feel really, this is why I think religion is healthy for some people, organized religion or a belief in a certain set of beliefs, right? Is basically what that is. Because then they say, because God wants me to be here. And so it gives them a little more footing. Like they are not as fearful of the unknown. They don't feel like they're just floating aimlessly through life, right? They feel like they have a mission. They have something that they can accomplish, something they can work towards. There's something they can measure, right? As they can measure their value based off of something, based off of the word of God or, the rules of something else. And if you don't have that, you're lost. So how could you, but in the end, that can ultimately hurt people too, because they can feel like they can never measure up. They never actually accomplish what they think that they need to, or that God hasn't given them their specific mission, or that they've failed in some way, shape, or form. And that can be hard. So, I think that like the idea of just knowing that like you're here, you are trying to be the best person that you can be, knowing that you are, as Christians would say, you're a sinner, or you're always at fault, you're always going to fail, and that there's nothing wrong with that that's okay, that's part of the process of life, is to fail. And it's actually something beautiful, because that's how we learn, that's how we grow, that's how we expand and become better, right? And why do we want to be better? Is because it just feels good to be better. Like we want to constantly be a better person. And then we don't find our value through this measurement, but just from living life. And maybe your own set of measurements, maybe that's what people do, their own set of measurements of how do I feel like a good person? I don't know. How do you feel like a good person? Like what makes you feel like you're a good person?
That's a really good question. Me, I feel like it always comes to my behavior and how I treat other people. I always try to treat people good, even if they're not good to me. I feel like that orientates me towards being
externally
a good person.
Or even internally.
Both.
Because there are people who can be smiling, but they can be thinking, oh, you're a piece of shit.
No, it's both. Like, yeah, there's of course people I do not like that. I try to give the benefit of the doubt though. And I'm not fake like that. Like I will express myself either way, but I would say it's how I treat people and authentically like try to empathize with them. Like even if I don't like someone, I find myself always trying to like, oh, where are they coming from? Why would they behave this way? Kind of thing.
That curiosity, but do you give them the benefit of the doubt too?
I try to, yeah.
It's hard sometimes, though.
It is, because I
don't moron. What the fuck were you thinking?
Right, no one likes to be judged, and I'm like, well, it doesn't feel good when like someone's done that to me or whatever, but I try to do that, but of course there's times where it's like, what the
See, those are what certain things where experience is the only thing that will teach you that. Is like what you just said, where hey, I've had that happen to me, or
Mm-hmm.
I've been that way before, so
Mm-hmm.
I want to give people grace, basically,
Mm-hmm.
to make mistakes, or to that they're doing things that might seem extremely wrong or stupid or whatever, and yet know that, like, and hope that they can just, that they're learning from it, or that, know that you've been there before, and you would have liked somebody to respond to you, not with judgment, not with hate, not with anger, but with love and compassion, and allow you the space to learn that on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something you try to do. It's so hard, though. It really is. It's definitely a hard thing to be a good person in the world when there's so many bad people
Yeah.
around you, and so many reasons to be bad, or
Right.
reasons to hate the world, or hate people, or to judge the world in so
Well,
many
you also have
ways.
to be keep your consciousness above water, so to speak, on that too, because it's actually emphasized to, like, we're constantly being provoked to be angry and hate with the information that's thrown at us all the
Provoked.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? It's
So,
like definitely like the concept of Satan is
hmm,
like
you have bad news constantly that makes you angry, no matter, like, quote unquote, what side you're on or
right,
something. Like, there's
right.
always information that's, doesn't this make you angry?
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like
You
the
know?
like I was thinking about like the Pensy spices or whatever, and I was like, God, this guy is just so full of hate, and he's so angry. Like he's overclassifying, and then like half of the fucking country
Mm-hmm.
as being racist,
Mm-hmm.
and then not only just like thinking that thought, like, oh, I think, like, not thinking, oh, I think these people are racist and I feel really bad that they're racist and they shouldn't be, but like, fuck you, racism. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, but a racist mindset is hate,
Right.
and the feeling that you're superior over
Right.
another race.
And who's
And so
doing
then you're
that? You're
literally
literally
doing that
doing, you're
to people who you
becoming
think are
what
racist.
you hate.
Like, that's so, like, okay, but like, it's racism, but just for a political class now.
Right. Yeah.
So politicism.
Right.
You're a politicist. I don't know, like that, but it's like, how do you think you can combat fire with fire? Let's
Yeah,
just put more
exactly.
gasoline on it. That helps.
Yeah.
Geez, spices, you're ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
that's just ridiculous. So, but it's like, it's hard. I don't know where I was going with that, but like,
The
oh,
provocation of hate and
oh yeah.
anger.
So then, you feel in your heart like, oh, I'm mad at this guy
Yeah.
for being mad at people who he thinks are mad at him. So it just keeps
Right.
begetting,
Right.
hate begets hate,
Yep.
begets hate, begets hate, over and over and over again. So where does it stop? Like, where do you find that line? And I think that it does stop with when you make the conscious choice to, like, this man has for some reason, he feels like a victim, and feels like the world is a victim to this classification of people that he calls Republicans, and that he thinks that they are behaving in this horrible way. Think about what it must feel like to feel that the world is racist,
Right.
and that there's this group of people. Now, bear with me here. Hopefully my brain will stay on track. That there's this group of people out there that want to put themselves above other people, and limit them because of the color of their skin, to being able to be or benefit from being just a human part of the human race. That would be awful to think that and was there a time in the world that was? Absolutely. Is there pockets of that happening all over the place? Absolutely. That's, like, I'm not denying that racism exists in the hearts of
Mm-hmm.
many people, but to say that it's fully into like half the population of America is really,
Absurd. It's
it's
just straight up
absurd, and
absurd.
it's sad because you can't even see the progress that we've made in a very short
Well,
time.
this is
I'm not
how.
saying we're completely there yet,
Right.
but I don't think that focusing on racism is going to stop racism. Just like focusing on the war on drugs is not going to stop the war
War
of
on
drugs.
drugs.
It
Yeah.
just feeds it more.
Right.
So then you feel compassion for him because he's feeling that way. And I think that's how we overcome that. But we don't, but you still can't feed him either way. You can't feed him with anger, but you also
Mm-hmm.
can't feed him with allowing him like I'm just gonna keep buying Pensy spices or whatever it's called,
Right.
like so that he can continue on his rampage of anger and frustration with more money in his pocket, which gives him more influence and more
Right. Mm-hmm.
power. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that, but at the same time, it's hard to not. And this is where I'm trying to say, stay with me. It's hard to not then do what he's doing to us by
Mm-hmm.
feeling like, oh my God, there's so many people in the world that think that there are people that the world's full of racism, and they're trying to limit us and stop us from growing and expanding. So we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling the exact same way, but the opposite. And that's what you see in these two wings
Mm-hmm.
of this political bird is you have one side of it that's like, oh my God, like you guys are gonna you're gonna limit everybody and not give equality or whatever. And then on the other side, you're like, stop taking my freedom away. So there's the fear that people are there's fear on both ends of the
Yeah.
wings. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. And it's hard to not, and we're so in the middle that we see it. Like we're the kid in the middle with the parents fighting, you
Yeah.
know? And we're like, God, you guys just stop. Like this, how do we, and it's hard to like not take mom's side sometimes and not take dad's side
Right.
sometimes, because you're like, yeah, you got some points. Yeah, you got some points. And but like how do we not join, you have to stay in the middle when that's happening, and not join one side or join the other is really difficult. But and you just feel like they're never going to come together, and then that's our own hell. And I totally just went on a rant about that because I still want to get back to drugs, but
Yeah, I don't know.
I
You
lost you
me.
on that. That's where my brain goes.
That was a
Sorry.
whole different rant.
So we're filling people are filling a hole, right?
Yeah.
Do you think? I want to talk. I
think
want to
there's a
talk to
lot
some
of-
prior meth addicted,
Yeah.
heroin addicted people, and I want to know what that was like for them. You know.
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm not talking to the right person.
I know.
I can only draw from the frame of reference of cigarettes, alcohol. Well, I've never been
Weed.
addicted. Yeah, just anything that I've done, I guess. Caffeine. I have a
Yeah.
caffeine addiction. But then again, well, see, I don't know. There's that line. Like, I drink caffeine every day. Do I go without? Sometimes, but not very often.
Not very often.
Because I like to
and
have
if you
it.
don't have it, you're like, oh man, I need
I
my
want
Mountain
one,
Dew.
right? Yeah. I feel like I don't feel like yeah. So I don't know if you consider that addiction, maybe, But it is interesting though, because we do dismiss caffeine. It is a low grade drug, basically.
It is.
I just think there's different levels. I think there's physical addictions that
Right.
become part of your physiology, obviously. Like caffeine, I guess, would be one of those. It's not a mental,
Yeah.
it's not filling a mental gap necessarily.
Or emotional.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just a chemical dependency of
Yeah,
some
sugar does
minor
that.
sorts, right?
Yeah, you feel like you need sugar.
Yep.
Sugar's extreme.
And then you move up, and then you have,
Addictive.
the other addictions that are psychological or physiological. Like cigarette smoking isn't just physiological. It's actually there. Well, I don't know if this would fall under that term, but like for me, even that act of putting, like what do they call that? Like a fixation, like a oral fixation, which sounds really dirty, but it's the act of putting your hand to your mouth is actually part of the addiction.
Ooh, I wonder how people are struggling with wearing masks while they're, I wonder if people are smoking less because of it.
I don't know.
I wonder.
I don't know.
Because normally people would go outside, and as they're walking to the bus stop, they'll probably be smoking. Yeah. But now people are wearing masks
But
everywhere.
It's weird because everyone I see smoking in their car ain't wearing a mask, So I haven't seen the two. I haven't seen someone smoke with a mask hanging on their ear. Yeah, I have no idea.
Interesting.
But
anyways. Yeah, so some people they'll start chewing gum.
Yeah.
Or they'll start eating carrots or something like that to help with the, right?
Yeah, I remember other times when I tried to quit smoking and it didn't last long. There's a lot of those times in between when I did smoke where I quit for a few weeks or something, and I would chew gum, or I would try to chew on what did I try? I don't know if I tried carrots. I don't know, but I tried other things. I'm like, no, it's just not as satisfying as
inhaling.
The act of lighting up a cigarette and and It sounds stupid, but it's literally the act of doing it that's part of the addiction.
Huh.
For me, at least. I don't think all people are like that. But
Yeah.
when you just stop and you have nothing to do, it's very hard to
Yeah.
stop doing that.
That's what
you
I've
know?
heard is one of the biggest things about smoking is that piece of it.
Yeah.
That like they get used to like taking their 5-minute smoke break
Yep.
and then when you aren't smoking, you're actually not getting that break and
Yeah, I told you that about writing too.
Yeah.
Like when I got, it was part of my ritual. Like I really enjoyed write for a while. It was like my little treat to myself. But you don't realize like you're like taking up like 10 minutes at a time, maybe, you know, or something.
Right.
And it's not just the time. Like, you know, you could argue the whole sleep theory. Like, well, sleeping wastes a lot of time. Like Doctor Who the other night. You know, it's not about necessarily time management. It can be for an employer, obviously, but it's that act of doing that is hard to get used to when you're no longer. It's like, well, now what do I do? And you suggested to me, like, well, why don't you just still go outside, but just stand? I'm like, no, I'm just standing there.
I'm just standing there.
Like, this is stupid, you know. And I stopped doing it because then I'm like, yeah, what is the point of doing it? I didn't know. I didn't find an answer to that. My answer actually was just keep writing.
Yeah.
Or just step back and take a break. I didn't need to go outside anymore, you know?
Yeah, you transitioned out of smoking so effortlessly. You know, I've heard that men can quit smoking easier than women too, though.
That's interesting.
Like, my stepdad quit smoking so many times. My mom, I don't think ever has. I think she's always wanted to, but I don't think she's ever quit, maybe for more than like a day or two or a week or two. I don't ever remember. She definitely didn't go for years or something like that, which is so sad. Like, it's such a toxin, you know? It's literally your body is like fighting off. Like, I don't understand how anybody, you know, I don't think people understand the ramifications of cigarette smoke, tobacco intake, and how toxic it is. Well, alcohol too. It's toxic. Yeah. That's why weed, cannabis, hemp, like, that's actually healing. Right. It's like, how is that an illegal drug?
Yeah.
When it is healing your body.
Well, that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
pharmaceutical
another
companies.
Different subject, but yeah.
We can't have a thing that grows in the ground actually cure so many things.
Yeah.
That would ruin our business.
Yeah.
I would not be able to buy my 10th mansion.
Yeah.
Oh. Greed.
Yeah.
But I personally know, you know, somebody who passed away from what was it, heroin or meth? I think it was a meth addiction just within the last year. Overdosed. Well, we know that friend who was, you know, childhood friend who I was very close to also. She passed from, I think it was heroin, and then a family relative who passed away from it, who got clean for years and then went back into it over and over again. And it just breaks my heart. Like, I don't know. We're missing something. Just like the homelessness in our world, we're missing something. It's not, we're trying to fix a problem. Like, maybe like you're trying to fix some sort of blood disorder with a Band-Aid.
Yeah,
you know, like, okay, it's a Band-Aid, but that's not going to help.
Well, we have so many people on my way home from work, panhandlers. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, I think so. Which is funny because we're in the
panhandle. Right. But there's so many. And the other day, our CSR said somebody came in. She thought it was a customer. They were right behind a customer, came in and grabbed a bunch of water out of our little fridge in the little waiting area and walked back out. It was a panhandler.
They just came in and took your water.
Came in behind a customer, didn't
just ask or anything.
Just grabbed a bunch of our beverages out of the fridge and walked back out.
Yeah, I'd really love to I'd love to examine that a little further.
Well, and I had one the other day too that was like, oh, I get really uncomfortable, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, God damn it. She came over, the guy in front of me gave her money, then she came over to my car, and then she was like, I'm like, I ain't giving her money, but she was like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna roll down the window, fine. And she was like, hey, you want to race? And I'm like, yeah, sure, ha ha ha. And she didn't ask me for money, but she was like, okay, we'll race then. I'm like, okay. she's like a younger woman, but she like had sunken in eyes, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
I
trying not to
know.
judge, but it's like,
It
I
breaks
don't
my heart
know.
because like we genuinely want to help people who need help.
Right.
And the problem comes with knowing who actually needs it and who's just trying to take
Right.
advantage
Right.
of the system. And then there's very religious people or even a lot of very left people are like, well, it's not for us to decide. It's not for us to judge. You just give with the giving heart and then hope that that helps. But then you have situations where like just recently this guy, I think it was in New York, like he took off his coat and gave it to a homeless man, and then the homeless man attacked him right afterwards, attacked him and stole his wallet and beat him up or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like he literally just gave you his jacket and then you just took it. He gave you, oh my God. Like
Yeah,
that, and
creepy.
that's the shit that happens
I
in the
know.
world. And so you have to be, I don't know, like you have to be aware. You can't just continue to give and give and give.
Right.
And then not be aware of the fact that there are people who aren't going to do good about
Right,
it.
exactly.
Like
and
that-
then you don't. The other thing is just like how much are you enabling the situation too? You don't exactly know, but how many times does that happen? Like Sarah's story with Walgreens,
Yep. Or my story
Or-
with the lady. I was parked in the parking lot and she's like, comes to the window, and they always do that when you park in some of these areas, and she's like, oh man, I got an interview and I can't get on the bus. I need a bus I gotta get a bus ticket. Do you got any money for me to get a bus ticket?
Yep.
And I just happened to have a bus ticket.
Yeah.
And I was like, here's a bus ticket.
Yeah.
And then she was like, motherfucker, this fucking shit don't help.
Yeah,
and
she
she was
didn't
so
want it.
pissed
Yep.
and walked away. I'm like, you literally needed a bus ticket. You
Right.
wanted money for a bus ticket. Obviously, you're lying to me then.
Yep.
And that's so sad because there are people who could have used that bus ticket.
Right.
Like to go see their kids or their whatever, like.
Yeah. My answer
it's
to that
just
is I would
sad.
rather just not. I will never give money. I've never given money to a panhandler, and I don't care if I'm going to hell for that because it's not my fucking problem. And maybe that sounds really ignorant or something, but you just don't know, and I would just rather not fucking deal with that.
And give money to the people. Like, don't just not give money, but give money to people where you feel inspired to give money to.
Right.
And where you feel like it will be best needed. And,
Exactly.
And a lot of times, it's not money that I think people need. Money is just, and it's one method to helping, but it's not an end all be all.
And that's what I was going to say.
What people could use is a smile, could use some scripture, could use some love, could use a job, could use I don't know, like
that's
a hand up in some way, or your coat off your back, which this poor guy did.
Yeah. But this is coming back to what I was going to say about all this tying into addictions and what we're missing. We tend to think money will solve everything, and it doesn't. It can, but it's like the building the homeless shelters in LA where they have the largest like homeless population. It's pretty much its own city, has been for years in the world. And their solution is spend all this tax dollars to build shelters, and then half of them are still living outside.
Because homelessness has less to do with not having a home and more to do with
psychological issues.
mental illness. And our country is not doing its job with helping with funding mental illness research.
But this ties in with the
we
whole...
want to medicate people again.
This ties in with the whole addiction conversation.
It does,
that
because
this
drug
is.
addiction
Because
runs in the homeless population. And why? Not because they're losers, not because they're incapable of having willpower, was because a lot of them have mental illness and they're self-medicating, and they can't, get a doctor's prescription for, medication they need for their schizophrenia because they're not there, so they just shoot up with what's available, on the street.
So in conclusion, lots of different drugs that do different things, but some of the common key points seem to be just mental or spiritual well-being, right?
I feel like a lot of it is emotional helping people to feel good about, if we want to step outside of mental illness in general, like,
Right.
people who do not have a mental illness, who are addicted to drugs, helping people to fill whatever gap it is. I don't know. To help people feel loved, accepted, respected, valuable, and to feel that way about themselves too. And I don't think rehabilitation centers do enough of that, teaching people how to, I think, understand their emotions, accept them, know that they're all there for a reason and for good stuff, and then learn how to consciously decide how to feel about things and how to get yourself into a space where you can have control over those emotions and that you don't need a drug to do it for you. It just seems to be, and I don't know because I've not been there, so I can't really say with hardcore facts that this is how to solve severe drug issues.
Right. But it is definitely a major piece that's overlooked.
It is.
Yeah.
They think we'll get them off the physical addiction, and why did they go back? Solve the problems that started it.
Right. You just cut the grass. You didn't pull the roots out, really. So to speak.
Why would you want to pull roots out of grass?
Well, I mean, the weeds.
The weeds.
you cut. You sprayed weed killer, but you didn't pull the roots out. Kind of thing,
Which is, that's such a good example, because that's how I dealt with all of my clients. Was like, okay, why are you cheating on your wife? It's not, it's not just just stop cheating. It's like, okay, well, what are the things that what's going on?
Right.
What are the reasons? Because otherwise, you're just gonna go do it to somebody else.
Right.
The same thing for abuse.
Yeah.
Why are you attracting abusive men into your life? Not just leave the relationship.
Right.
Figure out
get into another one.
And it happens all the time. So what is it that's causing the problem? It's what doctors should be doing with a lot of things. What's causing the cancer? What's causing your illness? What's causing the problem? Not just keep slapping medication and relieving symptoms.
Right.
We need to figure out the root cause of what's happening. And we don't do that enough.
No.
As much information as we have available to us at our fingertips, more than ever in the entire human race, civilization, like, we still can't solve these problems of equality, of homelessness, of suffering, of crime, violence, poverty. Like, why if we could get the best of our minds and the best of our hearts together and sit down and talk through these things and look at the root causes of these things, and then look at the implications of making certain changes and how that ripple effect will either hurt or help humanity. That's what we need. We need a galactic federation of light.
Yes, that is what we need.
Do you have any other things to say about this?
Nope, I agree.
Join us next time on whatever we're going to call this. We used to call it Deep Speak. But it almost feels like it would be better to call it Off Topic or something.
Off Topic.
Because we go off topic all the time. Train of thought.
Derailed train of thought.
Derailed. Okay.
All right, bye.
Congratulations, you've made it all the way to the end of this long-ass podcast. And we want to thank you for joining us. And we want to hear from you. What answers do you have to these questions? What comments do you have? What insight do you have? Share with us. And what questions do you have for the answers? Find us on all podcast apps and on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. And of course, you can find us on our website. Thanks so much for listening, and stay high, everyone.